Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning, everybody. This is episode 18 of the show about the show. Very, very excited today. I will be cranking out the podcast as long as your little ears can listen. So the first episode that we are going to do today is with former Major League pitcher Scott Sanders. Scott was a journeyman for most of his career. He played for 4 different teams in a 6 or 7 year period. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what it's like playing in the majors, as well as having to move from one team to another, what he's been up to since leaving the game, as well as what it's like playing over in Japan. He played for Nippon over in the Japan League, so we're going to talk to him about that as well. As always, every episode of the show about the show is dedicated to the memory of my dad, who taught me to love the game of baseball. You can find me on Twitter, Devlin_Clark84. Devlin_Clark84. Please also go on iTunes and leave me a 5-star review for this episode, and you will be entered to win a signed baseball. Just tweet me a photo of it or send me a picture on Facebook or message me that you left a 5-star review for our program on Facebook on iTunes, and you will be entered to win a signed baseball. So without any further ado, I am pleased to have on former Major League Baseball pitcher Scott Sanders. Scott, how you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm doing well. So let's talk a little bit about growing up, kind of where you're from, how you got involved in baseball, and then when you kind of knew that you might have a shot to make it professionally.
Well, I was born in Hannibal, Missouri, which is the home of Mark Twain, and about 2 hours north of St. Louis. That's where my father was coaching high school basketball. But my father and my mother both went to Nicholls State in Thibodaux, Louisiana, where I reside now. And so when I was about 18 months old, my father and my mom and my sister, my older sister Jennifer, we all moved back to Thibodaux, Louisiana, because my father was coming to coach basketball at Nicholls State, where he went to school and played basketball and baseball. And so I grew up here in Thibodaux, started playing baseball at the age of 5, liked baseball, but I really love basketball. My dad was a basketball coach, like I said, so basketball was my passion. I played baseball, in the meantime, because I like when basketball season was in, I played basketball, and then when it was over, I played baseball until basketball season came. But my heart was really with basketball. But baseball always came very easy to me. I was a natural baseball player, so I really always enjoyed the game, but it wasn't really my passion. And then, I went on to high school, and still basketball is my favorite sport. I always dreamed of playing basketball and baseball at Nicholls State because that's what my father did. And he was my hero growing up. He was my role model. He's the person I looked up to. And when it came time to choose for college, the basketball coach offered me a half a scholarship, and the baseball coach offered me a half a scholarship, and I had to pick one. And luckily at the time, Mike Knight, who was the baseball coach, I'd been knowing him since I was probably 10 years old. I was his bat boy for probably 5 or 6 years and went to camp, and I'd known him well. And he called me in one day to his office, and he said, "Scott, I know you love basketball, but he said, I think if you really put your heart and soul into baseball, one day you can make some money at it." And at the time I played shortstop, I hit, I pitched, and then so I was like, you know what? I'll give that a shot. It was hard for me to give up baseball, but my dad had retired from coaching basketball about 3 years earlier. So that kind of easy made the burden easier to go to Nicholls and play both, because I think if he'd have coached, I'd have definitely went and played basketball for him and played baseball, during the spring. But the basketball program was a little bit down at the time. Baseball program was always really good. So I like to win. Unfortunately, it's a good and bad trait to have, but I love to win. So I chose baseball. Main reason is because they win, and I wanted to go to regionals and do all that stuff. So I chose baseball. And then when I got there, he's like, "Scott, we talked about coming here, and just focus on baseball." He says, "I really think you need to just focus on pitching, give up shortstop and give up hitting, because if you do that, it's going to be the same as playing basketball." So once again, I wasn't too excited, but I trusted him. I said, "Sure." So I gave up, and so that's when I became a full-time pitcher. And honestly, I played my first 2 years. I was redshirted my first year, which they do to almost everybody at Nichols. And my redshirt freshman year, I had a good year. I went 6-1, had a good ERA. And then that summer, I went away to play in Red Oak, Iowa, which is the Jayhawk League for summer ball. And for the first time, I touched 90 miles an hour, and all of a sudden there were scouts there every time I pitched. So it was kind of interesting. So all of a sudden it really clicked like, okay, now I got a shot. And, then I came back to Nichols for my redshirt sophomore year. And by the time I pitched once in the fall at LSU, and I think I topped out at like 93, 94. And after that, I never pitched in front of I never pitched again without a scout, in the stands. And, luckily I was blessed and ended up going in the 32nd pick of the first round in 1990, picked by the San Diego Padres. Honestly, Kevin Towers, one of my good friends, just passed away of cancer about 4 weeks ago. He was my area scout. He signed me, and I was his first big league he ever had. So that's how the story of Scott Sanders began.
Absolutely. And you talk about, pitching going from, baseball not even being your favorite sport, or the sport, I guess you said that you're passionate about, to kind of being talked into trying out for the team and then making it and whatnot. Can you talk about what it's like when you're in high school to have that kind of, or high school or college, have that kind of talent and then have scouts coming after you? I mean, that's got to be a pretty fun but also stressful process.
Yeah, it is. The one thing, though, I was always a very confident kid, and I always tell people that there's always a fine line between confident and cockiness. I don't really like cockiness, but I love confidence. I love kids who are confident. But I always believed in myself. I always knew when I walked on a basketball court or walked on a baseball field, or even if I'm walking in to take a test, that I was going to be as good as I can be. I was going to be one of the best in that, and whatever I was doing, I always felt like I was going to be one of the best. So for me, it wasn't a hard transition because I like the spotlight. Honestly, I love to go out and dominate and give my team a chance to win and help my team win. You know what I mean? That's what I thrived on. That's what made me. That was like my adrenaline. That's what made me want to go out and work hard to do it again. The next time I could do it. But when I went from, so I grew up in a kind of a small town, but in the small town, every small town has a couple guys who are always, a little bit, they excel in sports. So, I was used to seeing my name in the papers. I was used to, seeing stuff like that. I was on, my dad was on, his team was on, TV here and there. So I was used to being around a lot of media and a lot of stuff. So I was never really overwhelmed, by a lot of things. But it was more exciting. I mean, so, when I went from high school, only Nichols State is the only one that really wanted me. A couple other schools talked to me, but they really thought I was going to go play basketball because everybody knew my dad was a basketball coach. I love basketball. So baseball teams didn't really even offer me, because they said this guy's going to play basketball, and whether he plays basketball, he's just going to play baseball there also. So I had really, so from that standpoint, when I got to Nichols and all of a sudden everything just started getting bigger and bigger, honestly, it made me bigger. It made me stronger. It made me even more of want it more and more and more. So I took it and really used it as a positive and just made myself better. And I worked harder and I ran farther and I ran harder and I lifted heavier, and I threw more. And I did everything I can do to make sure that I didn't look back and say, man, I wish I'd have done this, because if I would have, maybe this would have happened. And that's what I really learned from the experience.
Do you remember a specific moment being at Nichols and, you're into the game and you notice a scout, and you said that, when you notice a scout, it made you better. It made you kind of rear back and get a few more, miles an hour and try a little bit harder and kind of amp you up. Do you have a specific moment that you can remember, maybe in the middle of a game looking over and seeing a scout and then, digging down a little deeper?
Well, honestly, believe it or not, it's kind of weird, but when I get locked into a game, I would really notice nothing besides my catcher, and sometimes I wouldn't even notice, and we can get into that later, but when I would notice the scouts would be before the game. So when I'd warm up in the bullpen, the scouts would always come down and stand behind me and watch my bullpen, watch my pregame, because a lot of scouts, they like to see the bullpen, because the bullpens are just as important, because sometimes you have better stuff in the bullpen than you do in the game and vice versa. So
Sure.
that's when I would mainly notice. And, I wouldn't turn around and count, but you could feel a presence. You can feel sometimes there'd be as many 30 guys there to see me. Sometimes it'd be 2 or 3. But that's the time mainly when I know, like, okay, when I'd sit there and I could feel those guys breathing down my neck, that's when I knew. I said, okay, it's go time. It's time. It's show time. It's time to put your A game on, Scott. Go out there and show these guys what go out and debut. Show them what you have. So hopefully one of these guys, one of these days, will pick you.
Absolutely. You talk about Kevin Towers being your area scout, and obviously it was a huge loss for baseball. Everybody who follows the game closely knows the impact that Kevin Towers had. Can you walk us through the process of getting the call that you were drafted, and then where were you? What was your reaction? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, 1990, I had, like I said, there was a ton of guys on me, and but Kevin Towers was the one guy who got to know me the best. We'd talk on the phone. He'd call me after some outings, and we'd talk. Kevin was a pitcher, so obviously, me being a pitcher, him being a pitcher, we had a ton to talk about. But he was an incredible scout with a great eye for talent, and not only pitchers but hitters, but he got to know guys. He got to know you. But, there's a lot of guys with really good talent, but they don't always have the intangibles to go with the talent. But Kevin always got down to the deeper root of guys and found out what were their insides about. What was their heart about? What was their gut about? When times are tough, are you going to fold? Are you going to you're going to get stronger? And that's what he did with me. He'd call me. We'd talk on the phone. I'd say once a week. On average, probably. Sometimes twice a week, but sometimes we may miss a week here and there. But and so we had talked a ton on the phone, but. When draft day came, now this was back in 1990. They didn't have it on TV, and they didn't have it on the internet, and they didn't have it all that stuff. So I was actually at my house in Thibodaux, Louisiana. Had a handful of friends and family over, and I got the call. I talked to Kevin, and he called me. My nickname is Sandman. He's like, Sandman, I got your 32nd pick, baby, first round. And obviously it was his first year scouting. You know what I mean? It was his first year as a scout, and he got 2 first-round picks for the Padres. Just shows you the talent he has. So his first year scouting, some guys scout for 12, 13, 14 years before they ever get 1 first-rounder. He got 2 first-rounders in the first year that he ever worked as an area scout. That just shows you that's why how his career took off and never looked back, because he was one of the best. He's one of the best of the best.
Absolutely. What was it like getting that call? And who'd you tell? And
well, I went to my mom and dad's, the back of the bedroom, and my mom and dad. I was in my mom and dad's bedroom when he called. And then when I walked out, obviously I was elated. I was walking on water, and you're so excited because once you go, a kid from Thibodaux, Louisiana at the time. It's a very small town. Nobody from here had ever made the big leagues or even got drafted. Really played professional baseball. So number one, I was honored. I was kind of, had chills and just excited. And I probably wanted to cry, but I don't think I did. But then, I came out and told my mom, my dad, my family, my friends, I had some media guys there, some newspaper guys were there. And it was just, it's one of those days that you look back and it's a day in life you're never going to ever forget.
Absolutely. So you get signed with San Diego and the Padres. You end up debuting in 1993. Tell me about August 6, 1993.
Yeah, so that's what I was telling you earlier. So at August 6, 1993, Tony Gwynn was going for his 2000th hit. Well, the day prior, which was obviously August 5th, I was in Tacoma, Washington, and I was supposed to pitch against the Tacoma Rainiers on the 5th. And I still remember it was about maybe 11:30 in the morning, and it was back when you had no cell phone. So my hotel phone rang, and I picked it up, and Randy Smith, who was the general manager at the time for the Padres, who was the scouting director when I signed. So it was Kevin Towers was my area scout, and Randy Smith was the scouting director. And Randy says, "Hey Scott, I got some bad news." I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "You're not pitching tonight." I'm like, "Oh, okay." I said, "What did I do wrong?" He said, "You did nothing wrong. You're going to pitch tomorrow in San Diego against the Rockies." And wow, when I tell you, I think I jumped up and hit my head on the ceiling, but I'm not sure. But I was so excited. I was kind of dumbfounded. I was like, "Oh, okay." He said, "What do you think about that?" I said, "I'm excited and I'm ready." "Okay, good." He said, "Don't." He said, "Pack your stuff. He said there'll be a car. We'll get you a car. We'll get you down here to San Diego tonight. So I got in a taxi, flew down to San Diego. He put me up in the hotel, and then so I show up on the park on the 5th, and Tony Gwynn has 1,999 hits, and it's a doubleheader. So I'm pitching the second game of the doubleheader. Andy Bennett's pitched game one. He was the ace of the staff. He had game one.
Yep.
So game one, I watched on TV because I wasn't officially on the roster yet. So after game one, they took somebody off the roster and added me to pitch the back end of a doubleheader. And so so I watched game one, and Tony Gwynn goes like 0 for 3 with a walk. So he's still sitting on 199. So I start the second game against the Rockies. I still remember my first guy was Eric Young. I got him a 3-2 count. I threw him a slider and walked him. I was nervous the first batter. Had little jitters. But once I walked him, I was fine. I was settled in. We ended up scoring like 5 runs in the bottom of the first. They get me a lead. I think I went 6-1 or something like that. I went 5 2/3 or almost right at 6 innings. I want to say I pitched. I mean, honestly, for my rookie debut, I was tickled pink. But the irony to the story, so Tony Gwynn also got his 2,000th hit in that game, and it was also beach towel night. So when I walked off the field after I got done, when Jim Riggleman took me out, I looked up and tipped my hat to the stands, and I looked up and it was literally a sea of towels just waving. So I was like, wow, this is awesome. So after the game, we go out to eat. My mom, my dad's there, my family's there, and when we sat down to eat, we ordered some food. And like I said, man, they had a lot of people there tonight. And they were like, my dad was like, yeah, I think there was like 52 or 54,000 people. I was like, no way. I was like, yeah, didn't you notice? I said, no. I said, I didn't notice. I said, I never noticed that anybody was in the crowd until I walked off. You know what I mean? And I tipped my cap. I said, besides that, I didn't really hear the crowd. I didn't see the crowd. I had no clue that there was over 50,000 people there. But that just goes to show you how when you get on that mound, you get locked in, and it's just literally you and your catcher.
Absolutely. Now, those Rockies teams back then, I mean, they had Larry Walker, Andres Galarraga, Dante Bichette. Those teams were pretty loaded.
Oh, yeah.
So to go in there and pitch well, that must have given you a lot of confidence.
Yeah, it did. Honestly, they were loaded. They were a big-time monster, offensive juggernaut back then, you know what I mean? And luckily, thank goodness that first start was against them in San Diego, not Colorado, because that would have been rough. That'd be a rough, but yeah, I was very blessed. I was like that year was '93. I was the first rookie pitcher to win their debut. Like it had been over 10 years since a rookie pitcher in San Diego had won their rookie debut. So I was so excited and so blessed.
So you end up playing for the Padres through the '96 season. You go to Seattle in '97. What do you remember about being a Mariner?
Well, okay. So it's funny. So Kevin Towers, once again, the guy who drafted me, he calls me one day. He's like, Sam, man, I got some bad news. I'm like, okay, go ahead. He's like, I just traded you to Seattle for Sterling Hitchcock. I'm like, oh, KT, because I mean, literally, I just got settled in San Diego. I had my best year of my career in '96. Pitched the Padres from. We were so-so at the All-Star break, and I came back. I came back and I pitched them. I pitched all the way, pitched us to the playoffs. Had like I said, had my best year of my career. Started game one of the playoffs, and then got traded. But we were really right-handed dominant, so he needed a left-handed pitcher to kind of settle all. It was myself, Andy Ashby, Joey Hamilton, Tim Morrell. We had 5 right-handed started pitchers. So he got Hitchcock to kind of get some lefty matchups in there. And so I went to Seattle, and honestly, it's probably one of the worst moves for my life, for my career, because back then they had 2 baseballs. They had American League Baseball and a National League Baseball. The National League Baseball had a little bit higher seams, was better for a pitcher. The American League Baseball had a little bit smaller seams and tighter seams because, back in the day, the National League was always better than the American League. So they made the baseball in the American League a little bit more offensive, offensive minded. So it was harder to throw breaking balls.
Sure.
It's a ball, So I really struggled with that smaller ball, and actually that's the ball now. The major leagues is that American League ball, but so it took me a little bit. So I kind of lost my slider. My slider was my pitch. That was my go-to, and I lost it. So I really struggled in Seattle. I busted my tail. I started the season as the number 2 starter, only because Randy Johnson was hurt at the beginning. So I took, or it might have been Jeff Acero, one of the lefties. Then they had Seattle had all lefties. They had 4 lefties in the rotation. That's why they wanted me to go there to kind of balance out the righty-lefties. And so I was supposed to be the number 3 starter. I got bumped up to number 2 and got my head handed to me by the Yankees in my debut. And didn't really get off to a good start. I started about 4 or 5 games, and then they needed help in the bullpen. They put me in the bullpen. And then in July of that year, Randy Smith, who was my GM back in San Diego, traded for me. He sent 2 starting pitchers to Seattle for me, and I went to Detroit. And then I didn't do too well in Detroit as well. Once again, American League. And then luckily, in 1997, I started the same thing. I started the year. I had a couple starts with Detroit. They put me in the bullpen, and then there was a little struggle in the front office between Buddy Bell and Randy Smith. Randy Smith had a lot of his guys on the roster. Buddy Bell was the manager, and he kind of really wanted to show, he wanted more of his guys. So I was Randy Smith's guy. I mean, like I said, he drafted him. He was the guy he was the scouting director who drafted me in San Diego. He's a GM who called me up to the big league. So I was kind of looked at as his guy, So with a little power struggle, Buddy Bell won out, and they traded me back to San Diego, which and at the time I'm so glad that Buddy Bell had that power struggle with Randy Smith, because it's the best thing that ever happened to him. I went back to San Diego. I went to Vegas to get back in shape because I hadn't pitched much. I'd sat almost 2 weeks between when I got designated for assignment and actually got the pitch. So I went to Vegas. Was actually going to get called up. I was in New Orleans, back home, playing against the Zephyrs, but I was with Las Vegas at the time, the Stars, and they told me, Scott, you're pitching tonight. You got 1 inning, maybe 2, and then you're flying out tomorrow to meet the team in Seattle, which was kind of ironic. So I come up, I throw an inning, I come up to bat, and I bunt the ball straight at home plate. And typical me, I should have jogged down the line and just got a double play, but instead I tried to beat it out, and I popped my quad. So I go from being called up and flying out tomorrow morning to basically about 6 weeks of rehab on my quad. And so that was kind of a bummer, but that's me. That's who I am. That's how I play the game. Most guys would have just jogged, got tagged out, double play, who cares, just AAA baseball, you know what I mean? But that's not my mentality. I know one way is hard. Play hard for your team, because if you play hard for your team, you get your manager, your coach, your players, your teammates going to respect you, And so I run down, I get 2 steps from it, and I mean, it's like I got like a gunshot in my leg, and just so I worked my butt off with George Poulos, he's a big league trainer now. We worked for 6 weeks and 3-day treatments, and All-Star break of '98. I got called back up to San Diego, so then that's when we made that magical run, and we went on, to win the National League West, win the National League, and also, we lost to the Yankees in the World Series, but honestly, like I said, it was one of the best moves ever happened to me when I got traded back to San Diego in '98.
Absolutely. We got a little over 7 minutes left. Were you on that '98 postseason roster for the Padres?
Unfortunately, I was not, because what happened was we, they go from 5 starters to 3, and and it was kind of a so-so situation. I really could have helped them, especially the Astros. I've always owned the Astros, because the Astros are really right-hand dominant. But Mark Langston at the time had never been on the postseason roster. He played 18 years and never been to the playoffs. So they put him on the roster, and we had a couple other guys who were kind of high salary guys who probably, looking back, wouldn't have been on the roster. But sometimes baseball, you have to do it. Guys making $5 million, you can't take them off the roster. You know what I mean? So I kind of got caught up in a little bit of that. But honestly, it is what it is. Would I've loved to have played in the big and pitch in the World Series? I would have. But honestly, I was there for every pitch. You know what I mean? I was with the team. I did everything. I just didn't get to step on that mound. But I'd already started game 1 of a playoff, so that honestly, I'd already reached a goal in my life that I didn't know if I'd ever any time you get a chance to start game 1 of any playoff series, it's so I look back and I know everything in life happens for a reason, and I know that I was so blessed.
So you played in the majors for just about 6 or 7 years. How much fan mail do you still get?
I still get a good bit, believe it or not. I don't know how they do it, but everywhere I move and I move and I move, and everywhere I move, somewhere somehow somebody still finds my new address. But I get a decent amount, here and there. I don't get as much because honestly, sometimes I see so many people. I sign cards, and now with eBay, I see a lot of people. I love to sign cards for people who want to sign to collect them. I really don't like signing cards for somebody to sign them for them to turn around and sell them. I'm not. I give out autographs for reasons for kids and for you can be 100 years old or 2 years old, but I like the people who want to collect to do it for collection, not to get to sell, and it's got to be kind of a dirty business. You know what I mean? So I know a lot of guys, a lot of my teammates, they don't sign fan mail that much anymore, which kind of bums me out. You know what I mean? And bums them out. But at the end of the day, when you click on eBay and you're like, wow, you see thousands upon thousands upon thousands of cards that
right.
that those are the same cards that somebody just mailed you, and they give you this letter of how they're such a big fan of yours, and I collect your cards, you know what I mean, blah blah blah, and it's a big song and dance, So I sometimes, believe it or not, I pick and choose when I do send stuff back and when I don't. But what I do, and they have a guy who on Facebook, Tim, he has this signature for soldiers. So a lot of times I collect cards for him and I send them to him, and then he turns around and he sells them, but he gives the money to disabled veterans and helps them out. So I try to take it and use it towards a good cause.
Absolutely. And listeners of this podcast are familiar with Tim. You can find him on Facebook. Like Scott mentioned, he is also on Twitter at SIGS, SIGS, 4 soldiers. Please go ahead and buy cards from him. If you're listening to this podcast, I lost my dad recently, and he was a disabled Army vet, and a lot of the money raised that Tim does goes to help disabled military veterans. It's a 501c, so it's totally nonprofit. So make sure that you're going to support them. Let's talk real quick we got about 3 minutes left, Scott. Let's talk about what you've been up to since leaving Major League Baseball.
Well, I tell you what, now I'm a full-time dad, and I have 4 kids. My oldest boy, Scotty, he's a first baseman at Southeastern Louisiana. He plays on the baseball team there. My second son, Cameron Sanders, he got drafted last year by the Padres and decided he was at junior college and decided to go to LSU to pitch. So he's at LSU this year pitching. My daughter, Lindsay, she plays first base at Coastal Alabama Bay Minette, which is a junior college right above Mobile, Alabama. And then my little guy, Jaden, he's a freshman in high school, and he plays baseball, and he also plays club volleyball. So my kids keep me busy. They myself and my fiance Renelle and her daughter Skylar, seems like we always in the car going some direction to watch somebody play, and but honestly, we love every minute of it. Skylar's going to graduate this year from high school and is going to probably go on to school at ULL, University of Lafayette. So next year we'll have her in Lafayette, and she doesn't play sports, but she stays busy and she's very active and does a lot of great things. And so that'll give us another direction to go. So we definitely, myself and Renee, really have a lot. We don't have any down days, put it that way. But we try to get as many down days as we can and just lay low. But it's not easy to do. And honestly, today we're about to get in the car. Scotty's playing against Cameron. Southeastern is playing LSU today at Alex Box Stadium in Baton Rouge. So it's going to be a big day for us and it's a fun day for the family, and looking forward to that.
Absolutely. We got about 2 minutes left. Give me a very quick thought on your experience playing in Japan.
Oh, Japan was awesome. It's kind of weird because the guys over there are not as big, not as strong as American, as baseball here in America. Obviously here we have Dominicans and Venezuelans and blah 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 and all that stuff. Japanese come over, but over there you can only have 4 foreigners on per team. So the power numbers are down, but what they do, they have all the parks are smaller. So instead of being 330 down the line, it might be 310. Instead of center being 405, it might be like 390. So they adjust the game to their size by how they build their stadiums. But the baseball over there is amazing. The discipline they have, the hard work they do. Sometimes they overwork, to be honest. But overall, I had an amazing experience here because, number one, it's the cleanest and safest place I've ever been in my life. I mean, it's just, I could tell you stories, and maybe if you had me on another time, I can tell you stories about Japan that just blow your mind. I mean, I wish people in America
Absolutely.
could go there and feel that culture, because it's just, you're talking night and day. When you walk down the streets in America, sometimes you never feel safe. You can walk down it could be 2:00 in the morning, and you can be throwing $100 bills off your hands, and somebody's gonna go pick them up and bring them back and give them to you. I mean, it's just, but I loved it there. I only had 1 year because my mom was kind of shocked when I went over there, but I went over there because I wanted experience, and I wish I could have had a couple more years, but I didn't. But it was amazing.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I think that is a great way to wrap things up. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been episode 18 with Scott Sanders, former Major League pitcher. Scott, I'm going to let you go. I know you got some family obligations and stuff to handle today, and we got about 15 seconds left. I cannot thank you enough for coming on my podcast, and we'll have you on again in the future. Take care.
Thanks for having me. Anytime. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Yep. Bye-bye. That was Scott Sanders, former Major League Baseball pitcher. Stay tuned. This is the first episode we have that I am putting out today. I have another 3 or 4 more to come, including a top employee is going to be my next guest on the podcast, and we are going to talk about what it's like working for the biggest card company in America and what it's like to have your own baseball card. This has been episode 18 of the show about the show.